My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. The Bible refers to money as the root of all evil. Jackson Browne's lyric described life as being caught between the longing for love and the struggle for the legal tender. Why do we spend so much time worrying about money, working long hours to make ends meet while denying ourselves and our loved ones of quality time and happiness? My guest this evening, Leanne Jacobs, says that the sad truth is that no matter how many zeros our paycheck contains, most of us are only not financially broke, but spiritually and emotionally broke. In her new book, Beautiful Money, The 4-Week Total Wealth Makeover, she guides readers to tidy up and cleanse their personal finances by taking a holistic approach, creating prosperity financially, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Leanne has worked in sales and marketing for several Fortune 100 companies, including Johnson & Johnson, Nike, DuPont, and L'Oreal. She has an MBA and leads seminars on personal finance, entrepreneurship, leadership, spirituality, and holistic health. An 8-time marathoner, amateur surfer, and Reiki healer, Leanne is working with her husband to create a health and wellness charity dedicated to the care of children. Please join me in welcoming Leanne Jacobs. Good evening, Leanne.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us today. You know, I'm willing to wager that on New Year's Eve, many of our listeners made a resolution to live by their budgets and be frugal this year, scrimping and saving, and just feeling miserable about it. Now, your new book, Beautiful Money, has answers for them to turn this around in 4 weeks. Now, your bio would indicate that you lived the perfect life, but there have been times that you've struggled and worried about money. Please share your story with our listeners.
Yeah, so I think it's sort of like, I think when we deal with dieting and we get the perfect food plan that we know if we follow it, it's going to work. But for some reason, it's so challenging. And I think it's the same thing with money. People can give us that perfect budget and give us the intellectual to-do list of how to be financially well. But books haven't really factored in the being as a whole, and our habits and what drives us, what's behind the money. And so for me, I feel like I did a really great job of following that plan of, I remember in high school, I picked my career based on the average income of the career choice I was picking. I remember my guidance counselor gave me kind of a chart, and he said, okay, well, here's the average incomes for all of these career paths. And I remember making my decision based on that because I thought, well, if I pick this, I'll be stable and I won't have to worry about money. And that's like, I don't know how old you are, probably 16. So I remember making a money decision really early in my life on what I was going to do in my life based on how much I earned.
Not so much on your soul satisfaction. You left out the part about being happy with what you do.
And there was no other question. Exactly. There was no other questions asked. Just, obviously, they did say things like you want to look at what you tend to be good at, and maths and sciences were something I was good at. But that was really the only factor that made my decision. So I chose engineering. And yeah, for me, it definitely wasn't an ideal fit. But I kept trying to make it work. So the path of, get a great degree, go do a grad degree, get an awesome job with a great company. I mean, a lot of people have followed this equation. It always felt like I was living too small and trying to fit a mold that wasn't working. But I don't know, maybe I didn't have the maturity at a young age to recognize, or the confidence at a young age to recognize that I don't have to fit the traditional mold. So I just kept plugging away. And how I hid that void was by being busy. So I got married, was working full-time job for Johnson & Johnson, was doing my MBA at night, was finding a 24-hour gym so I could train for my marathons at midnight. It was insanity, and I did it for many years. My soul was definitely starving. I was in my 20s, and I think at that evolution of the soul is still quite young at that age, typically for people.
Absolutely.
So I was just getting more signs that I was off of my destiny.
Just out of curiosity, how many hours a day were you putting in that time?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably from about 6 in the morning until, if you factor in my workout, because it felt like work to me, probably 6 in the morning till about 1 in the morning.
Oh, my.
And then I would sleep for about 4 or 5 hours. It was crazy. And I mean, there are so many people living this reality. So it seems absurd when you re-talk about it, but I know so many people who are living like that as well.
Let's take a step back for a second. Did your upbringing have anything to do with your attitude at the time?
It's a great question. My dad was a lawyer and my mom worked in the banking industry, but they definitely weren't. They wanted me to get good grades, and definitely I think there was a do something that's successful versus something that makes you super happy. But they weren't really pushy. I think they knew that I was pretty independent, so they didn't try to push me into anything. So I think it was my own doing of more of a tribal philosophy that I jumped into.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So. That's sort of, how I kept getting red flags along my path. But how a lot of us are, we wait until there's a crisis before we know something's off. But there hasn't been a crisis yet, so we're going to keep trying to make it work.
Yeah. Pushing through, thinking that everything is going to be just fine the way you're going at that point in time. And then what happened?
Exactly.
What made you change?
Yeah, so I was in my later 20s, and my husband at the time and I, we decided that we were going to be separating. And I think that maybe gave an opening. It gave a little pause and a little space for me to recognize that my formula was it lacked joy. So even though it was pretty on the outside, I couldn't physically keep going that way. I knew that if I kept doing what I was doing, I probably would get sick because it was so misaligned with what I desired that it just came to a point where my body wouldn't physically function if I didn't make some change. So I think that decision to separate was almost like a little bit of an opening that, okay, I need to start getting rid of what isn't working in my life and kind of start clean. And I didn't have kids at the time, so I didn't have any responsibilities in terms of dependence. So that helped me to, start unraveling what wasn't working. So I think it was going through divorce that started it.
Did your path lead to the separation and divorce? Or contribute to it?
That's a good question. I'm sure it contributed to it because I definitely was addicted to being busy. So was I physically present to the ability I could have been in my relationship? Probably not.
Okay, so you're separated, you're done, divorced, and the pause comes. The pause, the time to stop and think and look at your life and what's working and not working. What happened next?
Yeah, so I recognized that I tried the pretty path that everyone seems to be following, and it just led me to being unfulfilled and unhappy and starving physically. I was living off of a diet of, very little protein bars and Diet Coke. And I realized that if the path that we're supposed to be following is getting me here, what's the worst that can happen if I actually try to start making choices based on alignment and intuition? That was really scary for me. because I think I know for me, fear was driving me. So in my mind was like, well, what if I let go of this and I fail, or I can't take care of myself, or I have no money? What if I let go and just trust that my life falls apart? But I thought, well, it's falling apart anyway, so why don't I give this a try? It sort of gave me permission to, what if there's a better way? And what if the opposite is true? So I faced fear for the first time in a big way, because I had to completely take care of myself. I didn't have my husband to depend on. And, we had a great friendship, so I relied on him a lot. And it was going to be time for me to step up in my confidence and self-esteem and trust myself, which was so scary.
I believe. I think fear is the greatest inhibitor to us making change in our lives.
Yes. I can completely relate, and it is this invisible wall that holds us back from living out our destiny. And I think, I know I face it at different periods of my life for different reasons, but that was the first time that I felt fear. I really looked it in the eye and said, you know what, I know it's there, but I'm going to choose to trust anyway. That was the first time I made that decision in my life. So that was the first big move. And then I quit my job when my boss was on vacation, which I don't recommend, but I was pretty desperate.
I can believe that.
And I sold everything I owned. I sold my car, my home. I ended up sort of selling to my husband, and he stayed living there. I sold all my assets, gave away all my clothes, other than maybe 5 items. And I was the most free and happy I had been in my whole life, which is quite ironic.
I can
no
believe
job,
that. I can believe
no
that.
car.
We'll be back with more of Leanne Jacobs' story. She's the author of Beautiful Money, the 4-week total wealth makeover on Destination Unlimited, after these messages from the OMTimes Radio Network.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Miriam Knight of New Consciousness Review, inviting you to my new show where I interview the rising stars of the conscious awakening. We'll explore the many faces of consciousness in action and intriguing perspectives on life, the universe, and everything in between. Join us each Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern on the Rising Stars Show.
You're not wired to have a response to this sound. You're neutral to it, and you can hear it repeatedly without feeling anything. But when we introduce a new stimulus, save the food, we've achieved pulling a natural or inborn response from you. Save the food, because 40% of all food in the US never gets eaten. Save the food. Cook it, store it, share it. Just don't waste it. For tips and recipes, visit savethefood.com, brought to you by NRDC and the Ad Council.
And we're back on Destination Unlimited. My guest this evening is Leanne Jacobs, the author of Beautiful Money, the 4-week total wealth makeover. So, Leanne, before the break, you were talking about the changes that were happening in your life and how you looked fear in the eye and said, I'm going to change, and it brought you about the greatest happiness. Tell us more about that time.
Yeah, so that experiencing lightness, and that's something that, over the years, I've come for me to recognize that is a big truth for me. It's the lighter I can be physically in terms of keeping my environment light, and I don't, that feeling of lightness and not carrying too much stuff that weighs you down, and having a lot of clean space in your life, for me, is an absolute truth and a necessity. So until then, I hadn't experienced how that felt. And so for the first time, when I sold everything, quit my job, was single, I had this moment where I felt that lightness emotionally and physically. I had no response. I mean, it was momentary because you can't, I couldn't hang on to that forever. I had to make some choices and obviously find a vehicle to earn income. But for a moment, I experienced that and realized that that feeling was what I wanted to feel in the next chapter of my life. That feeling of light and the ability to breathe. I traveled. I traveled on my own. I practiced being spontaneous and not overthinking, over-planning. I traveled to several countries without planning. I just would go to the airport, look at a board, and decide what I felt like doing. It was pretty amazing, especially being somebody who studied in engineering, very different from how I had behaved. So that was that little momentary phase, which lasted about 3 months. Mm. And then the fear started kicking in again. It's like, you're being irresponsible. It's time to go get a job. It's time to start, getting a real life. And so, of course, the fear can come back in. So I think you always have to keep your eye on it. So, I mean, it was definitely a little moving forward and a little moving back and playing that dance of fear for a little while. But little by little, I started to learn more about myself, and I think it all comes down to what is truth for you.
Absolutely.
And I think it's feeling truth in your body. You know what doesn't work for you, and I truly believe that your body will tell you instantly when you're aligned what isn't true for you. And so I practiced listening to truth more in what it felt like in my body, which is why I was so drawn to yoga and Pilates and Reiki and clinical nutrition. So incorporating those well-being habits in creating your path and following your destiny. There had never been a book written like that before. And I felt that the principles of treating yourself as a holistic being when it comes to money is a must. Otherwise, it's just money and you're going to make choices with just your brain.
Absolutely. It's interesting that someone who was profoundly in the path of science and math and engineering, which is everything by formula, everything has to fit in with a formula, mm-hmm. and yet you broke that formula, you broke that pattern and changed your life dramatically.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do, at the same time, I do believe that systems is key to creating wealth. And so I think what served me well was my education in how important systems are, mm-hmm. because that's a big part of Beautiful Money, and it's a 4-week program or system. But I do believe that working in systems is really profound and imperative to creating wealth. But along that, learning how to flow and learning how to tune in and check in and decide what's working, am I making my decisions from faith or from fear? So having checkpoints along the way and learning to flow, but having a system to guide you.
So why is our relationship with money so difficult for so many people?
I think sometimes because our hearts and our brains are in conflict. And that can create a challenge. Our emotions as well are interesting being creatures of their own. So it's like we can have a goal of being really disciplined around finance and budgeting really well and not spending, but we'll have a moment where we, for women especially, we have a big high or a big low in our life and we can't control our need to go spend to get that energy out. So when we're not looking at money as a whole person, this is why, everyone isn't creating amazing net worth and great wealth. So I think that that's one of the things to incorporate is like learning, almost observing ourselves when it comes to money. I know for me, even yesterday, I have 4 kids, so I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed and anxious yesterday because it was so crazy with the kids. And I recognized that my default was I want to go shop. That's still in me. That's how I was in my 20s. And I was like, I'm just going to go to the, furniture store and buy some new furniture for the house. That is in me for sure. But I've learned to recognize and observe it instead of just treat it literally and act on it. which has taken me about 10 years to do, right? But it's almost like, just learning to observe yourself instead of just literally let your emotions control your whole life. That has been a big practice of mine when it comes to beautiful money, for sure.
Someone once said that when the going gets tough, the tough go shopping, or something to that effect. You mentioned that for women. How do men react in those situations?
Well, I think everybody has their outlet. It could be alcohol. It could be work. It could be, social media and email. It could be just being busy, checking out emotionally. Sometimes it's like, what can I do that will switch my emotions off and put me in default? So a lot of times it's work.
Absolutely.
Right? Because you don't really have to feel. You can just function and do something that you're really good at, so you don't have to address the issues that are in your tissues.
As someone who is a recovering workaholic, I remember that when I worked and that devoted myself to the process of the work that I was doing, it kind of numbed me to what was going on in other parts of my life. For
sure. I can relate to that. And I had a lot of them. I had the work one, I had food, I had shopping, being busy. There were a lot of things. I would say yes all the time to be liked. So that was an addiction too, like to that need to be liked. So I would say yes to everything until my schedule was exploding with things. So, but it's taking the time out to just start evaluating and contemplating sometimes how absurd our behaviors are. And it's like, why didn't I notice this earlier in my life? I would have saved myself a lot of pain.
Absolutely. Now, what happens, we sort of touched upon this, and I know from my experience, but in your experience, what happens when people put in excessive hours thinking they need to do this to get by?
Well, it becomes an addiction. And then when the pattern is created and there's a hook that's done, then the fear sets in. And it's this false illusion that if I don't do it this way, everything's going to fall apart. So we almost create our own, we solidify our own belief that this is the only way, and that if we let go, everything's going to fall apart and our life is going to fall apart.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, what Absolutely. It's funny that question was the question that launched my recovery from workaholism. So
really?
We're on the same boat with that. Absolutely. Questioning whether something is absolutely true and real in our lives is such an enormous step toward making change. And I think a lot of people are afraid to do that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
100%. And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I think I have so much respect for people who go through this process with kids, because that process started for me. I mean, I have kids now, and I'm still going through the processes, but it started when I had no dependents. So I knew I wouldn't be homeless.
Absolutely.
I looked at what's the worst case scenario. I'll have to live with my family. That was the worst case scenario. So I think sometimes if we have that luxury, that worst case scenario is we have to live with a family member, it makes you realize that it's not that terrible. So why not give it a try? Human
beings, I believe, we have a tendency to catastrophize. I think that's something that's inherent in the human nature. And when we look at something, from my own personal experience, I know that when I've seen things in the worst possible outcome, when I come through the realization of those things, I find that that's not the truth.
Right. Yeah.
Now, what's the first step in making peace with our finances?
I think the first step is taking a second to take a pause, especially if you're like me and you're addicted to being busy. I realize every time I try to take a pause, I would try to fill the space with something. Like I would go to a hotel for like 2 days of retreat, but I had to check my email, and like I was addicted. And if you are like me, like try this. It's really hard to take a pause.
Absolutely.
Unless you're somewhere where you're guided, like a guided meditation where like they make you be somewhere where you can't work or you can't do your thing, like go shopping or go binge eat or whatever it is, it's really difficult to take that pause because we'll see our habits like kind of own us. So I would say if you can, like, take a moment, and it starts really with the realization that what I'm doing isn't working, and making a commitment to explore a different way.
Absolutely. So looking at the fact that what you're doing isn't working, and also, am I happy or not happy at that time?
Yeah, that's the big thing, because what's the point?
Yep.
If we're miserable and making a ton of money and we have no health, that's the thing that I thought was completely insane. Like, everyone I knew that was making good money, they were hot messes. And I was like, why? Like, I couldn't find... There are many out there, but I'm just saying in my own reality, and maybe this is one of the reasons why I stepped into, my next leadership role, was I couldn't find a person that I wanted to model. And that's when I realized, like, there is something wrong with this equation.
Absolutely. My guest this evening, Leanne Jacobs. She's the author of Beautiful Money, the 4-week total wealth makeover. Leanne, please tell our listeners where they can get your book and find out more about you and the work that you do.
So you can find out about and pre-order the book or order the book at beautifulmoney.com. And you can also connect with me at leannejacobs.com.
Wonderful. And we'll be back with Leanne Jacobs and more about Beautiful Money on Destination Unlimited on the OMTimes Radio Network after these messages.
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM Radio Network.
Are you in an interfaith relationship and thinking of getting married? For 18 years, Reverend Laurie Sue Brockway has been creating personalized, loving, and romantic ceremonies for couples of all faiths and cultural backgrounds. Reverend Laurie Sue's sensitivity to the needs of interfaith couples is reflected in the compassionate and inclusive way she addresses the concerns of parents and families. Reverend Laurie Sue is also the author of several best-selling books on interfaith weddings and wedding vows. Selected as one of the top interfaith officiants by New York Magazine, Reverend Laurie Sue serves couples in the New York metropolitan area and beyond. Find out more at her website, yourinterfaithwedding.com.
Every Tuesday on Living with Moxie, join Shefali Burns and Donna Martouge in conversations designed to take you to the next level, where we highlight ideas, resources, and strategies that provide you with the leverage you require to meet and exceed your business and personal goals. Each week on Living with Moxie, we will lead conversations related to success, achievement, fulfillment, and extraordinary, vibrant living. Are you ready to live with Moxie? Join us.
And we're back on Destination Unlimited. My guest this evening, Leanne Jacobs, author of the brand new book, Beautiful Money, the 4-week total wealth makeover. And by the way, the book just published yesterday, and it's available now. And what a better time of year to start making a better relationship. Resolve to improve your relationship with not only money, but your entire life through Leanne's process. So, Leanne, how does language affect our relationship with money?
Well, I think we're on the same page with this. I believe that language, every word has an energy and a frequency. And so I've always been quite mindful of words I use because I feel the energy of a word in my body when I use it. And I know a lot of you listening can relate to this. And probably because I am an extremely sensitive empath, I feel energy quite attunely, if that's a word.
Yes, absolutely.
So language, I've always, even as a kid, I've always recognized and felt language the way, when people would use it, I would feel in my body the energy associated with that word. I never knew how to express that process, but I felt that. And I never would use, I felt like I would never use words like I can't afford it or that's too much money. I never knew why. I just didn't use those words because it didn't feel right. And as I got older, I realized that every time I heard other people using that language, I felt heaviness. And I think sometimes if people shut off emotionally or they kind of give up and they just surrender to, well, this is just my life, that they forget or they lose that connection with the energy associated with words. So when they say language, especially around money, that has a heavy or a negative vibration or a low vibration, they don't feel that anymore. And there is an absolute sort of be careful what you wish for with the language around money.
Absolutely. I took a thing called Silva Mind Control many years ago. And one of the things that they stressed in Silva Mind Control was, as you speak, so will be. And so if you say something like, this job is killing me, guess what's going to happen? That job is going to kill you. And if you inadvertently, as we all do, is if you inadvertently slip out with a negative statement, they recommend saying cancel, cancel, cancel after making that statement as a way of deprogramming the thought that you've just put out.
That's a good one. I love that. And sometimes I get asked this a lot because people are like, I so know this, but growing up, I would always hear we can't afford it. Mm-hmm. So it's just like programmed in my body to feel and experience that. And I can relate to that because a lot of times, our upbringing definitely influences us subconsciously. So it becomes more of a necessity to be committed to doing that work of, I love the book, The Power of the Subconscious Mind by Dr. Joseph Murphy. Such an awesome book. But that one was the first one I really read that helped me to really be committed around language.
Absolutely. I think if our listeners did a very simple exercise, just when you're by yourself and quiet for a while, say the word hate. See how it feels internally. And then a few minutes later, say the word love and see how that feels internally. And you'll start to tune into what Leanne and I are talking about, that words actually have a visceral effect on our bodies.
Yeah, and I think the more work, the more beautiful money work you do, the more you feel in your body the energy associated with all words.
Absolutely.
And you remove a lot of them from your vocabulary.
Absolutely. Now,
there's words that...
Go ahead.
Oh, no, that's okay.
No, please.
There are words, and even write down words that you love, right? Like, I love the word grace. Mm. And when I say the word, it's like every cell in my body smiles because it has such a high vibration. So a simple way to start is write down 5 words you love. Like, I love the word truth. I love the word integrity. I love the word harmony. I love the word peace. I love the word well-being and health. Life force. So start with writing down 5 to 10 words that you love and introduce that into your day-to-day language more.
Very effective exercise, absolutely. It helps your body to feel what it feels like to enjoy the words that you're using rather than to fear the words that you're using.
Yes.
Now, why is it that so many people have difficulty discussing their finances, especially couples?
I think that's a cultural thing, and that's why I used the word at the beginning, the tribal. It wasn't that my parents were forcing me into a mold, but as a society, from kindergarten, we're sort of trained to fit a mold. And I even notice this now that I have little kids, and my oldest son just started junior kindergarten, and I observe how interesting the education system is, and I mean, I've committed to being extremely gracious and listening to feedback, but also recognizing that education plays its part, but it's not the only thing. But when I was a kid, it's like build the intellect, build the intellect, build the intellect. That's all that matters. So no wonder as adults we're broken.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us are just finding ourselves for the first time, in 30s, 40s, 50s. And I have friends that, they're giving themselves permission to start unwinding the untruths. It comes back to what's not true for you. As you unwind that and start little by little letting go of things that aren't true, you start building your confidence and your vibration and your health and your joy. And it's like, wow, imagine this is how we were trained as kids. This stunning beings that we'd be developing.
Absolutely. I know that in my late 30s, I was very spiritual as a kid, and then as adulthood took over and responsibility ensued, I remember shutting down that part of my life until my late 30s, and when a number of circumstances led me to yoga, and yoga led me to Reiki, and Reiki became the spiritual accelerant that opened me up and started me off, and just feeling that wondrous I'm alive again feeling that from embracing not just what I had to do in career, but embracing what I chose for my soul.
Yeah. There's not even really, it's hard to express that feeling that you're experiencing. And for me, it was yoga for sure. Mm-hmm. That feeling of, I don't know if it's an openness, like opening ourselves up and becoming flexible. That kind of cracks you open for the first time, but it's hard to express that feeling of where have you been all my life?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. In many situations in life, we often need to decide when to actively pursue something and when to let it go. How does that apply to our money?
Yeah, so I think for me, I look at what is the cost on my health, because I can, especially if you're well educated. I mean, I could go get a good paying job tomorrow with a fancy title, you know what I mean? But it wouldn't be true. Mm-hmm. And health for me is my number one priority. So if I'm not healthy and happy, is it really worth the money? So there's been many times where people have said, well, can you run a course? And people would pay $1,000 for it. And I just thought I could, but it would be misaligned right now, because right now I'm not feeling it. So sometimes I will go with feeling, and a lot of the times, because if it doesn't bring me joy and feel right, I typically will not execute. But in the beginning, it isn't always an option to just, stop. I'm not saying stop the income stream you have if it doesn't feel happy and healthy, but it can be a baby step. So what I started doing was I did like you, started doing my passion part-time. So it's almost like you want to create a strategy and create a plan and subtly start moving in the right direction. So some people can do the drastic, I'm just stopping everything in a day and I'm moving to Bali. I know people who have the ability to do that because they don't have responsibilities, they don't have kids. They can live off very little income in Bali, so it's not a big deal. But for the majority of people, they don't have that ability. They have to be financially responsible. They have mortgages. They have families. So it's like, what's one thing you can do? And for me, it was I loved the health industry. So how could I not affect my day job, but do something in the evenings and weekends that could move me a little? It's like, just take that first step. So for me, it was getting my Pilates certification. Got me my foot in another dimension of well-being and started the process.
Absolutely. So it also involves integrity. You have to be true to yourself.
Absolutely. You get to a point in your life where if it's not aligned with truth and integrity, it instantly affects your health and it affects your emotions. I just can't relate to living fake in any way. But I know for a lot of people, if you do something long enough and it has the looking good, like you have a wicked car because of it, an awesome home, you've got like all the bags and everything looks pretty. If you do that for a long time, you can start to feel like that you lose your sense of reality and truth. So it can feel on the surface like, yeah, this feels right. But there's going to be that constant nudge in your body that something is off.
Absolutely.
And it will get louder with time.
It's like an itch that you have to scratch.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and the life of the millennials, as they're called, some of the Gen Xers and then the millennials, as they're called, is a totally different. Are we giving the wrong message to the millennials?
Well, I think I meet a lot of, I think it's like anything, right? You'll meet all kinds of different individuals. I think the gift of a millennial is they have a lot of freedom to pursue their greatest life because of technology and the freedom to really live anywhere. However, I think one of the things that brought me the biggest gifts I had was developing the discipline and habits of excellence through my time in, my 10-year corporate career and growing up with parents who were very much about integrity and good habits. So I developed a discipline, like an athlete, for whatever I did. And so I think with the millennial generation, they have so much freedom, but I think they really have to make sure they keep their eye on developing those little habits of excellence that are what creates greatness.
Absolutely. My guest, Leanne Jacobs, author of the brand new book, Beautiful Money, The 4-Week Total Wealth Makeover. And we'll be back with Leanne after these messages on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Have you ever wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free today at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
Hi, this is Sylvia Henderson, intuitive life coach and energy healer. Are you ready to elevate and rise way above your normal? Be sure to listen to my show, Intuitive Transformations, on OMTimes Radio, Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern. Get the inspiration you need to transform your life.
This is Terry Van Horn, and I want to invite you to join me for my weekly radio show, Hailing Light, on OMTimes Radio, every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On Hailing Light, we want to bring love, light, and blessings into your world. You can find out more about us at www.healinglightonline.com. Blessings.
Today we decided to walk to school. The light counted. 15, 14, 41, 31, 13. We took a left on Carroll Street. Danny's smart, but he gets distracted. I realized he forgot his homework. I hope he doesn't have another bad day at school.
When you can see learning and attention issues from their side, you can be on their side. That's why there's Understood.org, a free resource for the parents of the 1 in 5 kids with learning and attention issues. Go from misunderstanding to Understood.org. Brought to you by Understood and the Ad Council.
And we're back on Destination Unlimited. My guest this week, Leanne Jacobs, author of the brand new book, Beautiful Money, the 4-Week Total Wealth Makeover, which just hit the presses. Hit the distribution market yesterday. And this is a wonderful time to get yourself a copy of her book and start making changes for a better relationship for beautiful money in 2017. So, Leanne, in your new book, you offer a number of exercises for writing our relationships with our finances. One is called Make Room for the Great. Please tell us about it.
Yeah, so this is one of the things I realized in my own life was because I was so chaotic and busy all the time, there was no space for anything greater to come in. And this is kind of like a universal law that those of you who study a lot in spirituality have heard many times. But you really definitely have to make the space for the beauty you desire. And I had no space. So I wanted this greater vision, but there was no space for it to come in. So the first practice I had, and I call it the Beautiful Money Cleanse in the book, it's cleansing your life of what is no longer serving you, what doesn't feel amazing, what isn't aligned with your truth. And it doesn't have to be in one day, because for a lot of people that's really scary, especially for people who are attached to things. Like for me, getting rid of stuff is so easy. I love it. But for my husband, it was more of a process, because he has a little more attachment to his things. So he doesn't have a ton of things, but it was more of an emotional journey for him. So you want to tune into what you're like, and if you maybe need to take baby steps, or if you're like me, like go big or go home, and you just are ready to dive in and cleanse. So things that you can look at is how you fuel your body. So again, it might not be getting rid of anything that's unhealthy in your home, because that might not be realistic, but it could be removing some of the sugar from your home, replacing your fridge with alive food, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, healthy proteins. So just one at a time, some people say, well, where should I start? It's like my whole life feels chaotic. And that's a common question I get. I like to say start with the area that feels in your gut it's bothering you the most. So for some people, their car's always a disaster. And every time they go in it, they feel unwell and they feel chaotic. So start with that area. It could be your closet, it could be your office, it could be your kitchen, because it doesn't matter which one you picked. The act of starting to create space is the magic process, because just that space you create, even if it's a little bit, is going to start the transformation.
Absolutely.
So the Beautiful Body Cleanse is my favorite part, I think, of the entire process. It's the most impactful, and it's something that everyone can start right now.
Absolutely. It's like an internal form of feng shui.
Yes, absolutely. And, the more you get into it, you start with physical things because they tend to be the easiest to give away or to donate or to contribute to, maybe I had a friend, there was a lot of things in my closet I never wore, so I had a friend, I knew she loved them, I just gave them to her, and she was like, but this coat's like $2,000, and it didn't matter to me, because what's the use? It's just sitting there, and I'm trying to create space. And she already has the space, and she'd love a new coat, so it was like a win-win. But then it's also looking at things that are causing clutter in different areas, like your schedule, my day planner. Now I'm very mindful of the energy associated with everything I put into my schedule. Now, that took me 10 years. Wow. So if it doesn't vibrate at a high level, feel completely aligned, and be aligned with what my goals are, it doesn't go in my schedule.
Absolutely.
But that took me 10 years.
Wow.
So that takes time, that one.
Wow.
Because sometimes you have to do things, right? Like when I still had my day job, I couldn't not put it in if my boss wanted to meet me for coffee 3 hours away. I had to make it happen. But little by little, it was, okay, what can I do today at a little bit of a more mindful level? And I knew what my ultimate goal was, to have a clean, beautiful schedule that was filled with yoga, with speaking, with writing, with having connection with amazing people. That was my ideal. But when I looked at my reality, I wasn't there yet. But I knew that little by little I was going to get there.
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons why I do this program, to connect with people of minds like yours and practices like yours, and share that with others. And in doing so, create this wonderful energy of compassion and spread this as far as we possibly can. And I think that, for me, that's my soul joy. That's my soul journey.
Absolutely.
Now, another exercise. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I felt it was about time that there was a financial book that took this philosophy.
Absolutely. Now, another of the exercises you offer is the Wealth Disconnect Habit Exercise. How does that work?
Yeah, so sometimes if we look at our habits, and this was for me, like I wanted to create wealth so that I could be financially free. But if I looked at my habits, a good chunk of my habits were completely misaligned with the money that I desired. So, for example, if your goal is to create, let's say, a certain amount of income, but all of your time is spent on social media and going for coffees and watching TV. You know what I mean? Like, we have to look at our habits. So for a couple of years, my question that I asked myself was, is it revenue generating? And is it aligned with where I'm going? So I started to prioritize and schedule my time in a little bit more of a financially well way. So during the week, if it wasn't revenue generating and it wasn't part of my well-being program, I didn't do it. If it was something I wanted to do, like work on a website or connect with someone I really cared, I did that on the weekends. So I started managing my time a little bit better because I realized going for coffees 20 times a week is keeping me where I am. So I had to, that's just one example. I had to time manage better. Other habits I had was, living off of Diet Coke and sugar is not going to get me spiritually and physically to the area and destination that I desire. So my habits around food had to drastically change. And this took time too, getting to a place where I have wheatgrass every day and I juice every day and I take really amazing supplements. That was a process. I'm impatient sometimes, so I wanted it overnight. But that's one of the reasons why I kept binging on carbs and sugar, because I would self-sabotage myself. If I didn't do it perfect, I would be mad at myself, and then I would eat crap. And that was a cycle I had to, a pattern that I had to kick. That took time. We may want that to be fixed in a day, but it just doesn't happen that way for most people.
Absolutely.
There are some amazing people who can shift radically very quickly, but most of us take time.
Absolutely. Now, in addition to disconnecting from the negative habits, you also talk about 4 beautiful habits that we need to practice. What are some of those habits?
Yeah, so when we talk about beautiful habits, there's 4 quadrants that I'm going to just touch on when I'm talking about this topic. Love is one of the quadrants. So when you're looking at incorporating new things in your life, is it things that you love? So is it things that you're passionate about? Maybe there's something like yoga or like Reiki or Tai Chi or something that you've always wanted to incorporate. So switch out something that is either not making you money or costing you well-being, and switch it out with something that you absolutely love. The second one is leverage. So this is an area, how can you do less and make more? So when you think about leverage, there's a lot of things that, like, do I really need to, my brain used to work with, if I don't do it, it doesn't get done right. That costs people, you hemorrhage money when you have that mindset. Yeah. But people are so hooked on it, they think that it is the way. It costs you a fortune over a lifetime. So I started to think, how can I leverage this? Do I need to do it? So as an example, with my book going on, having a publicist and having an amazing web designer and having an agent, while I'm on vacation, all this stuff gets done. And it's like, whew, this is leverage. This philosophy is the philosophy that the wealthy figure out quite quickly in their lives, and they let that create wealth for them. So love and leverage. Leadership is another one. We don't have time to talk about all of them, but habits that create leadership is such a passion of mine. And now that I have kids, it's like, your goal really is to create as many leaders in the world as possible that are not, I like to say, stop focusing on how many followers you have and start thinking about how many leaders you create.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just like leadership is how more habits and more priorities in your schedule that develop your leadership to the next level. So maybe it's a retreat or a course or teacher training. Hire a mentor or a coach to help you with something that develops your leadership on a daily basis. Doesn't have to be a lot of time, but a little bit of time every day on developing your own leadership is going to not only create income for you, but it's going to a beautiful money person. It's like that person that's so aligned. You look at their life and who they are and you're like, that's what I want. Not just I am what I do. It's like what I am is inspiring to others, not what I do.
Absolutely, absolutely.
There's not enough of people shining in that area. There's lots of people like that, but we need more of them to step up so that other people can model them.
Absolutely. What first step would you recommend to our listeners to make 2017 their year for beautiful money?
Make a deep commitment at the cellular level that it's time to graduate. And if you're interested, I am so excited to be connected to people who are on the same page as me and start a beautiful money movement globally.
Wonderful. How are we going to do that?
We're doing it online with our community. So we just started this community, and every day it's people who are on purpose and committing to be connected together to create a movement that we're going to stop chasing wealth or stop chasing money and start creating holistic wealth.
Wonderful. My guest, Leanne Jacobs, author of the brand new book, Beautiful Money, the 4-week total wealth makeover. Leanne, please tell our listeners where they can get your book and find out more about this wonderful program.
Yeah, so you can get the book at beautifulmoney.com, and you can just pick whatever retailer that you prefer. And you can also get connected with me and find out more about the Beautiful Money movement.
And Leanne, it is my fervent hope that 2017 becomes the beautiful money year for all of us. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom today.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor the Voice Furman. Have a wonderful week, everyone, and see you next Wednesday.